Two movies, two different results. X-Men, Dark Phoenix, Captain Marvel. One was panned a lot more than the other on the internet, but that's the one that made about 5 times the money. So let's talk about it.
Hey there, this is Perch, and talking about online buzz, chatter, how it impacts a comic or a movie or some property. And for this, I want to use two very distinct, very near-term examples. We'll put them side by side. The first one is Captain Marvel, the movie, and the second one is X-Men: Dark Phoenix, the movie. So what we have here is two Marvel movies, one produced by Marvel, one produced by Fox, and in both cases the advanced buzz, if you will, if you were on social media with when Captain Marvel was coming out, you heard a lot about, this movie's going to tank, toxic femininity. I don't know if that's a thing. Toxic masculinity and fans trying to sabotage it and Rotten Tomato scores. And this film is going to be the bust of the MCU and take down, Kevin Feige and everything. That's what you heard. And there was this kind of drumbeat about this is a, quote unquote SJW movie that was going to tank. And then the movie came out, and the movie, did quite well. It did, depending on your point of view, it did what you expected it would do for how the Marvel movies are now being done, how they're coming out, or it wildly exceeded your expectations because you thought it was going to bomb. I don't think anyone. I don't think anyone was really predicting that it would go to $1 billion, but they were expecting it would do well. And the reason why they're expecting it to do well is kind of basic math. It's an action-based film set in the Marvel universe. So unlike, say, Ant-Man, which is more comedic or heist, or even Guardians, which did well but had kind of more twist to it, Captain Marvel was very much a, for lack of a better word, a meat and potatoes movie of a superhero origin story, fighting bad guys, shooting things up, action. That's what it was. And it had the benefit of being placed between the two Avengers movies and some advanced buzz of the Captain Marvel would be in the next Avengers movie. So, there's a lot of little elements in there around the film that, was going to lead to its success. But if you were on social media the week, 1 week, 2 week, 3 weeks before the film, what you were hearing was that it was just a catastrophic failure. And in fact, some people even did this very, they were throwing around charts that were sorted in a really weird way. So even in the first couple of days when Captain Marvel was, throwing out $100 million, they were like, oh, see, look, it's the worst opening. Because they were comparing kind of 2 days of Captain Marvel against, the lifespan of Doctor Strange. And it was looking bad. But the reality is that movie did just fine. But the thing I want to put your attention to is there was bad buzz and the movie worked out. Now let's turn your attention over to X-Men Dark Phoenix, where once again there's bad buzz. The early reviews are bad. You're seeing like, oh, this is trash. And what we're seeing with that movie is it was a bust. The movie did not do well. The movie is definitely hurt in the box office, not getting anywhere close to half or a third of Captain Marvel. I don't know. Who knows? Internationally, things will happen, but it's just there's a case where you had bad buzz and bad result ultimately. Now, just for a moment, I'll say as this tiny little sidebar, we live in amazing times where films that only make like $250 million are considered colossal failures. But be that as it may, we'll just slide that right over to the side. So what's the difference? What changed? Why is it that both movies had bad buzz, but Captain Marvel things were okay and X-Men Dark Phoenix things weren't? Well, the biggest clue in all this is look at the buzz. So the buzz around Captain Marvel, the negative buzz, the negative feedback, was all based around kind of social traits or this idea that the movie was kind of pushing an agenda. It was one step removed from the actual movie. And so what I mean by that is like, the reviews were not saying, Captain Marvel had a terrible plot, bad wooden acting, stupid third act, villain, gross, CGI, awful. soundtrack bad, motivation's weird, characters uninteresting. That wasn't the feedback. It was more around, hey, did you see what Brie Larson said, or did you see that they're taking down some reviews of Rotten Tomatoes? This is clearly a cover up. There's a lot of speculation, so it was one step removed from the actual movie. And if you want to know if a movie is going to do well or not, and the same thing is true with comics, at the end of the day, there's only one thing you can do, and what's that? It's go watch the movie or read the comic. It's judge the actual material. Whereas with Dark Phoenix, if you looked at those reviews and kind of that negative commentary, it was all, this movie is terrible. It was direct, 1-to-1. It was, the actors don't know what they're doing. James McAvoy's character is weird. Just very very negative, uh, directly movie related negativity. You didn't hear like, hey, James McAvoy said this about Republicans. That wasn't the negative buzz you were hearing. The negative buzz you were hearing was all about the film. And so this is true about comics as well. It's like, you see, when you see negative reviews about things, is it the creators are doing crazy things on social media, or is it this comic is boring, overpriced, and uninteresting? And the reason why I think it's important for you to kind of be able to separate those two, it's not to say any opinion's wrong. It's that, have you ever had the feeling like, man, I really hated this thing, I really disliked it, but turns out I was in the minority. Most of the people really liked it. Now I feel kind of either foolish or frustrated because, why don't more people think like me? Well, I mean, I think there's a, this kind of going to steer into a different direction for a moment, but I think there's some magic in life. Personally, this is my own kind of personal perch advice for everyone. I think there's a lot of magic in life when you like things other people don't. I think that's cool, or dislike things people do like. I like David Lynch a lot. I thought he was a great director, very clever, learned a lot about him, his style, everything else. Most people did not like David Lynch, as you could tell from the box office receipts of his stuff. How he held on to jobs. Kind of, most people didn't like David Lynch. And when I was younger, I remember that bugged me. Like, oh man, what's wrong with me? Why don't I like what's popular? This is a teenage angst kind of thought. And very quickly, it's like, you know what? I don't care what other people like. I don't care what other people don't like. I'm just going to like what I like, and I'm actually going to take some pleasure and pride in the fact that I like things people don't like. There's something unique about me that gets to like these unique things. That's cool. I feel stronger as a person. I feel more unique, more, I'm a special, unique snowflake. Um, whatever. I think it's good when you like things outside the norm, and I don't think you should be ashamed of it, upset with it. Let's say you like the this '90s comic with this crazy shoulder pads and belt and spikes and Triple H, whatever it happens to be, the character going on. That's cool. That's yours. You like it. Hold it tight. Whether it's good or bad, it really doesn't matter as long as it matters to you. I think that's cool. But back to the movies kind of conversation, I think that people have a way of getting kind of tricked in amongst themselves of saying, "Oh, this is going to bomb," or "This is going to be good." And if you want to be a good predictor of things, if you want to be, somebody who can kind of analyze and assess how well something's going to do and have some perspective, then what you need to be able to do is open yourself up to questioning your beliefs. That doesn't mean you let go of them. It simply means if you're trying to get a, what we call a 30,000-foot view of the property, the world, the comic, the movie, whatever, then you need to be able to put yourself in a place where you can question your beliefs, question what you believe, to see what the other angles are. And if that's the kind of statement sounds familiar, once upon a time, this was a leading, important factor of journalism, where when you're chasing down a news story or chasing down, an editorial or opinion, whatever else, it was in your interest to try and come to a conclusion in your own mind, but then put your conclusion to the side and question that conclusion, poke at it, hammer at it, figure out where your blind spots are, what is missing. That art is gone. Most most journalism, most media, they form their opinion, they form their narrative, and then they just chase to reinforce it. There is no any poking at it is just signs of weakness. And I think within comics, you see the same thing. And unfortunately, you do see it on both sides. It's very interesting. If you want to have a fun day on old comics Twitter, go on and just pick one of the people I did a while back. I did these little creators in crisis things, and I did one with Jim Shooter. And Jim Shooter, we'll do a whole video on him, but he's a complex guy. Shooter is not, the most amazing comic executive in all of history. He had some amazing accomplishments. He did some amazing things. He also had a lot of negative things that got attached to him. Some, you could argue are fair, like he was a tough boss. Some that, if you worked under him, that would be a crazy person to work under. So it's not all black and white. There are many aspects to Jim Shooter. But what was curious to me is once Jim Shooter was mentioned, there are a lot of people like they would not hear anything negative about him. It's like nope, nope, he's only good, and that's the same kind of attitude that I find we often get from quote unquote the other side, which says, hey, the Axel Alonso era, these kinds of initiatives that the publishers are doing, these are good, and we won't hear a single bad thing about them. Miss Marvel title, good. And if you dislike it, then you're wrong. Nothing is like that. There's almost always goods and bads. There's pros and cons to everything. And the trick is just to kind of get a good sense of them. And like the movie example, like Captain Marvel, there are a lot of people who went all in on this is going to bomb, this is going to be terrible. And then they refuse to look at the other side. They refuse to poke holes in their assumptions. And then week one, the movie comes out, makes tons of money, and there was kind of this kind of half-hearted like, oh, but I'll bet it will die in week two, and it didn't. It made more money, and then everybody just kind of got quiet about it. And people could have avoided that by simply saying, hey, this movie has a lot of characteristics that do not appeal to me. Hey, I think the marketing is bad. Hey, I think that the Brie Larson statements are going to catch up to her eventually. That will come to haunt her a little bit, and maybe she's chasing away some revenue. But on the other side, track record of Marvel films tells us this is going to make over $500 million. And the fact that it's marketed between the Avengers probably is worth another 100 to 150. And it's an action film, which does better than kind of comedies or sci-fi for them. So tack on another 150. I mean, you can say, you know what, this is probably a trajectory of this film, and yet I still don't like some of this behavior, and be a normal guy. That's somebody. I have various people who poke at me at different times, and one guy's like, he's always giving a middle of the road take. No, this nothing of what I said is a middle of the road take. I would call it a sanity take. That's not middle of the road. That's saying your opinion, while important and beautiful and charming, is not the only opinion out there. There are others, and if you're trying to get the full picture of anything, you have to be able to look at all the factors. That's it. You don't have to believe them all. You don't have to reinvent your world to align to something you don't believe in at all. You just need to be able to, assess both sides, get a complete picture. You're stronger when you have a complete picture. You don't need to change your opinion. There's some beeping going on. Anyway, that's what I think. So that's the interesting look. If you analyze Captain Marvel versus Dark Phoenix, two films, negative buzz up front. One, that negative buzz had a huge impact. One, it didn't. It's interesting how this stuff kind of rolls out and how it comes along. But interesting, you take a look at these things, and there you have it. Hey, thanks for listening a lot. Like, subscribe, notify, leave a comment, all that stuff. Glad you're here.